go and check what's going on with our friends, the Drunken Bozos, Black Sabbath. I've read many years ago an interview where someone from Black Sabbath, I forgot which member, but he was complaining that Rolling Stone magazine called them drunken bozos. I mean, are you serious? That's exactly what you are. What would you expect them to call you, professor? I mean, I'm no big fan of these music magazines, certainly not Rolling Stones, but come on, is that a complaint? There was always heavy metals things that, oh, we are marginalized and we are the outcasts of the music industry, blah blah blah. In the meantime, they were the most famous kind of music on the planet, especially in the 80s. But anyway, let's get back to Black Sabbath. And in 76, after Sabotage, they come out with this, Ecstasy. Well, if it were released today, it would be called Ecstasy. But back in the day, when one was still expected to talk in normal English, it was called Technical Ecstasy. Kind of a weird record cover. The whole thing is weird. It sounds weird, and especially those who had the privilege to listen to this right after Sabotage, I can understand what a grand letdown it was. And when I bought this record and I listened to it, I was not impressed. But with time, it started growing on me, and I started to appreciate more and more. The sound is not insane. So this is not one of those Black Sabbath records that you just put them on and you're immediately blown away. There's nothing super special or super outstanding or unheard on this record. And this is the first record of this kind. You know, the sound could be a number of other bands or other records, but it's not bad. It's getting a bad rap. People tend to hate or talk badly about this record. It's not a bad record at all. Rock and Roll Doctor is the single out of the album. Not an insane number, but I do definitely like all moving parts. Dirty Women, the opening, Backstreet Kids, has kind of like a childish kindergarten chorus in the middle, which is kind of stupid. I'm not sure if they meant it as sarcasm or as a joke, or they were serious. It's alright. It's kind of like a Beatles kind of song that Bill Ward sings. The Gypsy is also a good one. I think that's the second single or one of the two singles. And You Won't Change Me. So not a bad record by any means, as long as you don't expect it to blow you away and be some sort of phenomenal, unheard of, groundbreaking kind of record of a sound that's insane and that's truly innovative. So again, after 5-6 records, you know, how much innovation can you do? That's exactly what Fripp tried to do. Fripp tried to release every record something that has never done before, and he doesn't always succeed. But neither did Black Sabbath. Another one that gets a bad rap is Never Say Die. And I truly, honestly don't understand why. Does it belong in the pantheon of the first 6? I think it was 6, right? Black Sabbath, Paranoid, Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, yeah, and Sabotage, yeah. So pantheon of 6. Right, 6 of a perfect pair, if you will. What are the songs on this record? But anyway, Johnny Blade, great song. I love it. I love the record. It has kind of a weird sound on it, but a very characteristic, very good song. Very good song. So I love it. There is a sad song on this, Air Dance. Never Say Die, the title track is also pretty good. Hard Road, I love that song. Hard Road, Junior Eyes is not bad. So I think this record gets a bad rap mostly for the same reason that the previous one. That it's not kind of a super special, innovative, groundbreaking record. It doesn't have that huge, big, crunchy, doomy riffing of Iommi. Iommi is going to all kinds of directions, kind of jazzy, which ironically, when he did it on Volume 4, no one criticized him for, but here they don't like it. Over to You. Again, they're not bad songs by any means. I like the record. I really do. And I put it higher than most people would expect. But again, this is the end of an era. After this record, Ozzy was fired. It looks like the rest of the band were starting to rehabilitate themselves. They were turning 30 approximately, or actually more, in this time, and they were starting to get a little bit more control of their personal lives, their finances, their health especially. I think that they started to slow it down with the drug and the booze and the partying, and they were starting to take themselves as more professional musicians. Ironically, this is a time where people started to criticize their music and liking it less. And so here ends one chapter of Black Sabbath, and we will put them aside and come back to King Crimson, although chronologically we could go on a little bit further. But 1981 or 82 maybe, I think it was 81, Robert Fripp decides that he wants to revive King Crimson, but all that he does is revive the name. Besides for him, the only other musician from before is Bruford, who also wasn't there from the beginning. But anyway, he recruits Bruford, and he takes on two very, very, very interesting characters, Tony Levin and Adrian Belew. Coming from completely different backgrounds, Tony Levin, if you think about it, is not such a weird choice for Fripp. But Belew was not known as some sort of an insane prodigy. He was more in pop and more in the backdrop or backstage of music production, mostly in poppy kind of acts. So it wasn't known that he's a musical genius, although he was. So Fripp get these two characters in and starts King Crimson over again, a completely different King Crimson than the one that did Court of the Crimson King throughout Aspic and Larkstones and Red and USA and so on. And the band sounds different. The only thing that's constant is, of course, Bruford and Fripp and their madness and their insanity and the emphasis on uncompromising musicianship and doing crazy things, very rhythmical, very technical kind of things, and they come out with Discipline. And Discipline is also one of those albums that King Crimson fans are typically in one camp or another, the pro-Discipline and the anti-Discipline. And I think that a lot of people who know and love King Crimson from the beginning, they are against Discipline, which I don't truly understand, because it's a phenomenal record. Yes, it's phenomenal in a different way than Starless and Red and all of these from Ant Lady. But they release it, and I love it, and I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Discipline. I'm a huge fan of course, Discipline and Indiscipline. Those two tracks, Elephant Talk, all of them, frame by frame. By Tony Levin is a photographer. He used to do all kind of photography. I think he had a large format camera set up on stage, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to look that up, and somehow between different segments he would go and set it up and take photos. But anyway, I love the record. I really do love Discipline. And Fripp then tries to follow it up by something, I don't want to say more extreme, but again, out of the ordinary. And he releases Beat, which takes contemporary music as a basis or as a canvas for experiment. That's a very jazz kind of idea. He just doesn't do it in a jazz way. So jazz would incorporate something from contemporary fashion, right? They take all kind of world music. They take music from South America and China and Africa and whatnot, and do incorporate it in their improvisations and incorporate these ideas. Here he does more. He builds on it. He uses it as a basis to his music. So there's a big difference. But anyway, to me it doesn't sound good. I don't like this record Beat. It's sort of almost in a way, it's almost a desire to punish a turd, which unfortunately cannot be done in most situations. He takes contemporary, very disco-y, synth disco, very synthesizer oriented, and makes a record out of it. So again, if you want to have the entire collection, then go get Beat. Otherwise, does it worth a listen? Yeah, it's worth a listen. There are some that are not that are worth listening. You got Heartbeat, you got the opener, Neil and Jack and Me. Then you get Sartori and Tangier. It's one of those that it takes like forever for the song to build up, and you don't really understand what's going on here. What does he want? The Waiting Man is the one that they performed live from this record. Okay, it's one of those things, right? They took a left turn on a red light. Happens sometime. My least favorite King Crimson record, pretty much. Next up, they do another expectedly unexpected thing with Three of a Perfect Pair. Three of a Perfect Pair tries to take Beat and Discipline and squeeze it into the old King Crimson. In a way, there's a lot of lark tongues in aspic kind of worked in this. They actually took it back. I'm sorry. The last track on the record is Lark Tongues in Aspic 3. And they start dabbling in what is going to be called about a decade later industrial music or industrial metal, something like that. These things always existed, so it didn't really happen in the mid-90s. There was always kind of kooky music and bad music. In the boom of punk in the late 70s, early 80s, there were bands like that were not really musicians, but making noise and attention seekers. Joy Division comes to mind, but they were not the only one. Well, maybe it's not fair. Maybe Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream would be better analogies. So kind of very avant-garde, very, like I said, in Steve Reich kind of territory. Again, Three of a Perfect Pair, it's definitely worth a listen, more than Beat. Listen to Industry, listen of course to Lark Tongues in Aspic Part 3. Three of a Perfect Pair, the title track, Sleepless. But again, you kind of have to be a professional, like a rhythm maniac, a drummer, or someone who teaches to really appreciate that and enjoy it. In my opinion, this is not a super enjoyable listen, but again, it gets me on occasion, and I can listen to it. And this was released in '83, if I'm not mistaken. So this is probably, together with Beat, it's probably one of those albums that can be called ahead of their time. Again, just because something becomes fashionable further down the road, I don't know if it deserves the label ahead of the time, whatever that means. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of journalists and critics would write that. But again, they could also write the opposite in the same sentence, that it sounds dated and old. So who knows? Discipline for me, an absolute winner. Start to begin, I can listen to that record 2-3 times in one shot. Beat, not my cup of tea. And Three of a Perfect Pair, sometimes it gets me, and I'll turn it on and give it a listen. Kind of, you want to sit in a quiet evening when the girlfriend's not home and drink a good hot tea and maybe some other barley derived liquids. But anyway, this closes the second chapter of King Crimson, and now they're going to sleep for an even longer period. Again, I'm not doing Fripp's solo projects and Brian Eno and all the other stuff because it's just too much. And even with Black Sabbath, I'm not doing the solo stuff too much. I might, of course, mention it if it becomes relevant. But as the second era of King Crimson starts about the same time as Black Sabbath's second era. A huge difference between the bands was the consistency of the personnel. Black Sabbath is one of the very few bands that lasted about 10 years with no changes in the musicians. So the same 4 people released what we got, 8 records in a span of 9-10 years. I don't know if there's another band. Well, Metallica was very consistent, but Metallica came about a decade later, and they were a 4-piece, so they have the same 3, right? Trios you can find. You got ZZ Top, you got Rush, but anyway, a big accomplishment. At the end of the decade, after Never Say Die, Ozzy is fired. I'm not really sure why. Probably the drugs were getting to him too much. He was very unprofessional and not singing well. So I guess the band just didn't know what to do. And they were even thinking of disbanding. And then God sent them a present in the form of the legendary Ronnie James Dio. I don't like to use the word legendary, but I did anyway. Sometimes you just stumble. You repeat these stupid cliches like a monkey because you're so exposed to it. But anyway, Ronnie James Dio, truly one of the best vocalists in maybe in the history of pop music, who is objectively better. Phil Collins, Sting, but he's up there. Coverdale has a very, very beautiful, very powerful, warm, very full voice. And of course, people know him from Rainbow. He recorded 3 studio and 1 live album with them, and Rainbow were very big. So Dio was riding high. Dio left because, of course, Blackmore's shenanigans. As you can imagine, who can get along with Blackmore? Nobody, not even Blackmore himself. But he joins Black Sabbath. I forgot exactly how the story went, but they got introduced and they were looking for another singer and they didn't know if they would continue, and they had some sort of meeting and they jammed together, they liked each other, and he had Dio from the USA start recording sessions with the English Iommi, Butler, and Ward. And the result was an all-time insane classic, Heaven and Hell. This, for a very, very long time, was my ultimate all-time favorite Black Sabbath record. It still ranks super, super high. There's certain things that you just cannot supersede, but this is an amazing record. It sounds nothing at all like anything that the band has ever released before. There are, of course, similarities. So it's not a different band, but the record is very different. And they took everything that was good from the first run, the Pantheon, the first 6 records, and slapped it on this record with a modernized sound. So you got these heavy, big, huge full amplified Iommi riffs, but with a more modern heavy metal, like a fast tempo. Almost all the songs here are fast, and you got Geezer's bass that sounds good, and it's exactly where it should be. Bill Ward's crazy and insane and special, unique kind of drumming is very well mixed or balanced with the songs. It's just a great record, and Dio's beautiful warm voice blends so well in here. It's in a way you could say that Black Sabbath did some listening to Rainbow, especially Long Live Rock and Roll, which was a pretty innovative record in its time. 78. It wasn't Judas Priest, but it wasn't very far behind. So like a very unique and predicting record for heavy metal. So predicting of what's to come, innovative, as the journalists would say, or very unique. There's another word that they another buzzword cliche that they like to use. But again, some Long Live Rock and Roll was one of those records that kind of gave metal in general its direction. In sheer influence, because it was so famous, I think it was more influential than Stained Class in direct influence. Of course, Stained Class, the sound it gave birth to real 80s heavy metal as it became known later. But enough jabbering and rambling. So singling out songs from Heaven and Hell, that they're all great. But you can't go without mentioning Die Young, Wishing Well, the title track, Heaven and Hell, Lady Evil, great bass intro there, Children of the Sea. Great, man. Just a great record. And Lonely is the Word is such a sad and melancholic song out of it. I can't have enough of this record. I listen to it a lot, as you can imagine. And next up comes 1981, the next year, riding high on their success. They release Mob Rules. Again, another record that fans are split about. Oh, I forgot to say, in case you don't know, in case you're 1 day old, or you never listened to Black Sabbath before, or something like that, or you're a millennial, but then you wouldn't be watching this. If you're into Black Sabbath, you have to be either in the Dio camp or the Ozzy camp. Another one of these stupidities, right? You have to be for the Yankees or for the Black Sox or whatever they're called, the New York, Chicago Knicks or Bulls, whatever. I don't play this game. I listen to a record and whoever's on it, whatever it sounds like. I don't hate either. Well, I don't like Ozzy as a human being. I think as a whatever. But as a person, I'm not a huge fan of Dio either. So there you go. Dio is a better singer. That's an objective truth. I don't think anyone could argue with this. Ozzy was never much of a singer. I don't think he's a beautiful voice. I don't think he's a particularly capable singer. He doesn't sing that well with the music. Maybe that was the attraction. I think his attraction was always his madness. He was a clown, as Dio always accused him of being. To me, that's a fact. Ozzy is a clown. Now he's an old clown. He's a clown with a lot of drugs in his system. But he was a great frontman. He was great for Black Sabbath. They played and he jumped there and made a fool of himself and poured water on the audience. And yeah, he also sang. He's not horrible. He's not terrible. His voice fit the music well, or maybe the music was made to fit his voice. But he's no match for Dio. He's no match, I think, for any of the singers who came after him. Anyway, let's get back to Mob Rules. So the point I wanted to do is that in Black Sabbath you have to be in either the Dio or the Ozzy camp, and even those who aren't, people who have more than two brain cells to rub together, are kind of split on Mob Rules. A lot of people accuse Mob Rules of being a Heaven and Hell number 2. It's difficult to shake off this feeling. So is it exactly identical? No. Is it just a mere extension? It might be. It might be. So the songs are a little bit less well worked out and a little less well done, and it has Vinny Appice's American flavor drumming on it. How influential it is, I think, is up to individual if you listen to it a lot. But Ward is so unique, so special that it kind of, if you listen to another drummer after him, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't taste the same. So I think that that's one of the reasons that the record, in my opinion, is less good than Heaven and Hell. However, I can imagine that at the time, Heaven and Hell was released in '80. This came in '81. This was a good bang. I think it sold maybe not as much as Heaven and Hell, but pretty close. So at the time, I don't think most people took it as a big step down. To me, it wasn't a huge deception. I like Heaven and Hell much more, but this has some great playing, different aspect, a little bit more Americanized, as I said. Great record. All the songs pretty much are good. My personal big favorite out of the record is a song that doesn't get enough attention. In my opinion, it's Country Girl. Definitely the hidden gem, the diamond, the best song off of this record. Over and over, I could do without. It's kind of repetitive. It's kind of like repeating the slower songs out of Heaven and Hell. So maybe that's a valid criticism. Slipping away, and over, kind of like we've seen that movie already. But overall, great songs. Like I said, the Country Girl, Sign of the Southern Cross, Turn Up the Night. It's kind of like a Neon Nights #2. Okay, on that one, I could see the criticism. Turn Up the Night is I wouldn't say absolutely, definitely 2 hands down, but yeah, it kind of has a Neon Night #2 flair to it. But Falling Off the Edge of the World is one of those sadder songs there, and of course you got Voodoo, which is the intro to Mob Rule. So not a bad record by any measure, but again, if you expect it to be another Heaven and Hell, then you will be disappointed. Some because it will sound like a lame attempt at doing a Heaven and Hell #2, and some because it's not enough, maybe not as good as a Heaven and Hell. But anyway, it's not a terrible record by any means. I do listen to it. Not super often, definitely not as often as Heaven and Hell, but I do listen to it. Then we have this one. I kinda don't know what to do with that. There was a live record that came out before this one. I'm not even sure if it was an official release, but there was an Ozzy recording from the mid-70s, I think from the Sabotage tour. I'd have to check it out again, and that wasn't bad. This record showcases Ronnie's abilities live, which is great. Some of the songs here are great and some of the sound, but there is something is not right with this record. Not to the extent that it's terrible, not to the extent that it's horrible or unlistenable, but there are some parts that kind of fade out, that the balance is no good. All of a sudden you don't hear the drums, or you don't hear the guitar or the bass. There's all kind of stories that go around it. They used to sneak in the studio at night and make changes without each other's knowledge, and all kinds of just really bad blood in the band, and that kind of closes a very, very good chapter in the history of Black Sabbath. Sadly, it's sad that the chapter had to be closed, but Ronnie and Vinny leave not on the best terms with the band. And at this point, we could jump over to King Crimson, but like I said, they went to sleep for quite a long time, and Black Sabbath would go through some changes. I'm going through changes became kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so let's go to the next chapter,